I'm happy to be able to introduce Ted O'Toole this morning as our guest teacher. And Ted and I've been friends for a long, long time. He first became interested in Buddhism in 1973 and began his formal practice at 1992 at the Zen Buddhist Temple in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The following year, he moved to Minnesota and became a member of MZMC, and he received the precepts from Shohaku Okamura. He was ordained as a priest by Tim Burkett in 2005, and he received Dharma transmission from Tim in February of 2012. He frequently leads practice periods and meditation retreats, teaches classes, and meets one-on-one with students. Ted is the guiding teacher at MZMC, and he managed the project of the whole remodeling situation at MZMC, which is an enormous project. Okay, I will now turn it over to Ted. And you told me the title of his talk is Buddhism and Faith. So thank you, Ted, for being with us today.
Thank you, Dokai. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Great to see you. Great to be here at Hokyoji virtually. Just look around a bit, see who's here. I see some old friends. It's just really good to see you all. Hope you're all doing well, staying safe. Kind of a difficult time. MZMC is actually closed right now. We decided to close until the end of January and then reevaluate. And if things go as predicted, maybe we'll be able to open again February 1st. Well, we closed down except for our weekday morning and evening meditation. But we're hoping that if we can all just hang on for a little longer here, we might get a bit of a respite. So hope everyone is staying safe. And I'd just like to start by expressing my appreciation to everyone from Hokyoji, everyone who is taking care of Hokyoji. It's really incredible what has happened the last few years. And I know that's been an enormous project, the same way ours was, as Dokai mentioned. And Hokyoji is looking beautiful. It's a wonderful opportunity for people from many different places to come together and get some real quiet that we can't get in the city. And there's been a very long association, of course, between MZMC and Hokyoji. And we're actually in our 50th year, MZMC. I understand I wasn't there at the time, but that the group formed in 1972, 50 years ago. And so we're actually having our 50-year anniversary celebration this fall, and we've chosen some dates, September 9 through 11. So you can put that on your calendar. Basically, we're inviting everyone back who has ever practiced at MZMC to come and be part of that celebration. And we would love to see you there. So I guess that means Hokyoji's 50th anniversary can't be too far off either. So I don't remember exactly when Hokyoji was acquired, but I think it wasn't too long after MZMC was started. So anyway, I hope that this connection between these two places will go on and on for many generations. So as Dokai said, I'm going to talk this morning about Buddhism and faith. And I kind of like that topic. I kind of like edgy topics, and maybe faith is in kind of a mild way. But I can't imagine some folks thinking when they hear that title, Buddhism and faith, what's going on there? I don't know if there's a place for faith in Buddhism. That's what I came to Buddhism to kind of escape, because it has such a kind of a religious sound to it. But I think there is a place in Buddhism for faith, properly understood. And I think we can learn things from exploring some edgy topics. So I'd like to look into this. When I introduce people to Buddhism, when I do our intro, I start with some things that are very basic, and I like to echo my first teacher from the Ann Arbor Zen Temple. Her name was Suka. It's Haju now. She would tell people that the Buddha was not a god. The Buddha was a person just like you and me, who became awakened. And we can all become awakened. And in fact, we're awakened already. We just don't always realize it, or we don't always see it. So we put Buddha on the altar. We literally put the Buddha on a pedestal, but that doesn't mean we worship the Buddha. The Buddha is not a god. And I will say parenthetically that there are many approaches to Buddhism, and I respect them all. And in some, the Buddha does look quite a lot like a god. But in the way I see things, he was a human being just like you and me. So Buddhism could even be called, I think, an atheistic religion, which is kind of a contradiction in terms, but it looks a lot like a religion. And our Soto Zen tradition has a lot in common with many other religions, but we don't have a deity. And I don't mean to imply I'm not open to magic and things unknown. I am, and I'll talk about that a little more later. But I don't need to believe in anything magical, supernatural, in order to be a Buddhist. So why even talk about faith? Some people would say, why, we shouldn't even talk about it. Walpola Rahula, in his book, What the Buddha Taught, says, however you put it, faith or belief as understood by most religions has little to do with Buddhism. But it does appear in the Buddha's teachings, actually all over the place. And so I think it's worth talking about. And we can't ignore that. For many of us, I think faith describes a kind of emotional phenomenon that we feel. Most of us are not really totally rational, I think, when it comes to our spiritual life. We have some faith, and it feels good, and maybe we can be okay with that. But Buddhists have a word that is translated as belief or faith, and that word is shraddha in Sanskrit, Shraddha, or sada in Pali. And it appears in various places. The Pali Sutras list faith as one of the 7 treasures, one of the 5 spiritual faculties, one of the 4 streams of merit, and one of the spiritual powers. Don't ask me to list all the other things in those lists because I couldn't do it. And I think you could also say that faith is part of right view, which is usually listed as the first step on the Eightfold Path. And right view can be presented a couple of ways. Sometimes it's presented as simply a belief that the Buddha's teachings are good teachings, that they are true. But sometimes it's presented as saying that the right view is just a belief and understanding that there can be a better way. An understanding that things can be better if life is lived deliberately and carefully and examined closely. So this belief that life can be better, there has to be some faith there, because you can't know the end result when you decide to make that commitment to the path. But of course, the difference, what makes faith in Buddhism different from a number of other religions, is that it has to be based on our own observations. We don't believe in faith just because someone tells you you should have faith. It has to be based on something. And an example of that from the Buddha's life, which this may be mythical, it may be partially mythical, but when he went forth from the palace, had been protected from seeing suffering his whole life, he saw 4 sights. And he saw a sick person, an old person, and a corpse. But the 4th sight he saw was a wandering monk, a mendicant, and he saw that that wandering monk had a certain bearing. And this filled him with hope, a belief that perhaps there is a way to transcend suffering. And an example from my own experience, something that gives me faith based on observation, is teachers that I've seen, usually highly experienced teachers, not always, because I can be inspired. I can be inspired by many people, many different practitioners, sometimes people quite new to the practice actually very much inspire me. But specifically, I'm thinking of times at Hokyoji in the Zendo on long retreats. Years ago, when I was pretty new to this, I might see small things. I went to retreats led by Tim and Dokai. And when I get my mind in a pretty quiet place after a few days, I might be serving oryoki or something. I might observe these experienced folks like Tim and Dokai. I might see them simply folding their napkin and think, there's something there. There's something I've never really seen before. It's so subtle and I don't quite know what it is. But it makes me think that I should keep going on this path, and there is something to learn here. There is something very subtle to be learned. And that takes some faith. It really takes a little bit of leap. There's no guarantee that there is something there, that I will eventually understand it, that I'll eventually be able to practice it myself. But I observe it, and I'm willing to take that leap. And we can look at the Buddha's own words. He said to his followers, this is from the middle length discourses, "And how does a noble disciple possess 7 good qualities? Here a noble disciple has faith. He places his faith in the Tathagata's enlightenment thus. The Blessed One is accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of worlds, incomparable leader of persons, to be tamed." I think that means taming their desires. "Teacher of gods and humans, enlightened, blessed." And in another place, he indicates that you need faith in order to do this practice. He was teaching in the village of Sala in the Kosalan country, teaching the Kosalas. Perhaps you remember this talk of the Buddha. That village was situated at the entrance to the forests. In the forest, and a lot of Brahmins would come along, teachers would come along, and they would stay in that village overnight. And they would expound their own views. They would tear down the views of their opponents. And basically, the Kosalas came to the Buddha and they said, "What should we do here? We need help in figuring this out. How do we decide who to listen to?" And they gathered, and the Buddha asked, "Is there any teacher agreeable to you in whom you have acquired faith supported by reasons?" And they said, "No, there is no teacher agreeable to us in whom we have acquired faith supported by reasons." And the Buddha said, since they had not, they could undertake and listen to his teaching. So the Buddha is saying here that faith matters, but also he's saying that it must be supported by reasons. And of course, that's important. And I think he's implying here a little bit that you need to have faith in one teacher. If you don't settle on one teacher, you can only advance so far. But He also cautioned against the wrong kind of faith. He once asked his monks, what if someone were to ask you, how do you know the Buddha is enlightened? What do you base that upon? Here, he said, as a proper answer, the monk should say, well, I approached the Buddha so that I could hear the Dharma the Buddha taught me at higher and higher levels. And as he did so, through direct knowledge of a certain teaching here in the Dharma, I came to a conclusion about the teachings and placed confidence in them. And the Buddha says, when things are done in this way, faith is supported by reasons, is rooted in vision, and is firm. There is an investigation of the Tathagata in accordance with the Dharma. So no blind faith. In fact, the opposite is encouraged. Always question. If we know that people are always questioning the Dharma, questioning teachers, that will make the practice stronger, not weaker. The Buddha said at another point, speaking to the Kalamas, don't hurry to believe in anything, even if it has been written in the Holy Scriptures. Don't hurry to believe in anything just because a famous teacher has said it. Don't believe in anything just because the majority has agreed that it is the truth. You should test anything people say with your own experience before you accept or reject it. So even our Zen teachers may have special clothing. Well, not today because my robes are at MZMC and I'm at home, but sometimes we wear special clothing. And there's a reason for that. It shows that someone holds a certain position, has had certain training, etc. But it doesn't mean that, of course, you accept things unquestioningly. Sometimes in the literature, I come across things like you should trust your teacher 100%, give yourself entirely to your teacher, and I really don't follow that. I think everyone needs to hold a little back because you never know. Abuses have occurred. Everyone must retain their own agency. So faith is something wonderful, but it's also something to be careful about. So I found an article by Bhikkhu Prayud Payutto. I hope I'm saying that correctly. This was given in Thailand about 20 years ago. And he's a scholar and a Thai Buddhist monk. And he wrote an article called Faith in Science and Buddhism. And he said most religions use emotion as the energy for attaining their goals. Emotion is the inspiration which arouses belief and obedience to the teachings, and emotions, particularly those which produce faith, are a necessary part of most religions. And he goes on, while faith is the most important force in most religions, Buddhism stresses wisdom, giving faith a place of importance only in the initial stages. Even then, faith is only used very carefully, as wisdom is considered to be the prime factor in attaining to the goal of Buddhism. Even so, faith does have a place, but in a different role. There are also elements of faith in scientific research. In order to clearly understand faith, we should see that there are two kinds. There is the kind of faith that obstructs wisdom. It relies on inciting or even enforcing belief, and such belief must be complete and unquestioning. To doubt the teaching is forbidden. That does not allow any room for wisdom to develop. And then he says faith in most religions is of this variety. And this feature of religion is known as dogma. Buddhism, however, is a religion free of dogma, he says. Well, one would hope. I don't know if it's entirely free, but we should continually work to keep it free. But the second kind of faith is a channel for wisdom. It stimulates curiosity. It's the incentive to begin learning. When faith arises, it gives us a starting point. Faith in a person in particular leads to approaching and questioning that person. Having faith in the order of monks, for example, encourages us to approach and learn from them. Okay, so after all of that, I think it's probably time to try to come up with a definition of faith. Rahula's definition is confidence born of conviction. That's pretty good, but where does the conviction come from? I'd like to offer another definition of faith: an open-hearted willingness to go further in Buddhist practice, inspired by example and continually tested against personal experience. So it's an educated leap into the unknown. So one might ask, in order to move one's talk along, what does this rather complex view of faith mean for our practice here and now? How can we use faith as a hindrance? Use faith as a help, not a hindrance, in our practice? And I've come up with 4 principles. So the first one, which I've already covered quite a bit, is rather than having blind faith, we follow something like the scientific method. There was a Buddhist philosopher, Asanga, of the 4th century, who said that Shraddha has 3 aspects. 1, full and firm conviction that a thing is. 2, serene joy at good qualities. And 3, aspiration or wish to achieve an object in view. So you get this conviction, joy, and an aspiration to move further. And this occurred when I met my first teacher, Haju, in Ann Arbor. I saw her genuineness, her kindness, her calmness, her persistence. And I was just really inspired by that. And I thought, I can have a great deal of trust in this person, and I'm going to go much, much further. So kind of like having a hypothesis and testing it, kind of like the scientific method. Thich Nhat Hanh says that if you make a scientific discovery, you publish the results. Most people aren't specialists in the field, and they don't investigate the results themselves. They just have to follow. And I'm one of those when it comes to science. E = mc squared. I believe that, but it's pretty much based on what others have said. I haven't done my own experiments. But some people will review a scientific article and they'll try to duplicate the results. They have to check for themselves. And Thich Nhat Hanh says we should be like the latter type. In Buddhism, we don't take it based on what other people said. We investigate for ourselves, because that's what we do, right? We do the practice. We do the practice ourselves. In the Buddhist world, we are all specialists. We can only know that the Buddha's methods work if they work for us personally. We take responsibility. That's the deal. So we follow something like the scientific method. Number 2, we should recognize that although faith has this rational component, that there is also an emotional component, which really can't be ignored. Now, to Payutto, this was a bit suspicious, and emotion is something that religions manipulate for their own ends. And well, yes, some do. Such manipulation is harmful, but I don't think we can deny that emotion, faith, wisdom, all of these things tend to get intertwined in our complex human brains. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And Thich Nhat Hanh lists it as one of the 5 powers, and he says, when we have faith, a great energy in us is released. This emotion, there's a great energy there. We need energy for our practice. And this may seem familiar to you. Maybe you encountered these teachings at some point, and you observed, and over time you committed to them, you began to practice, And maybe you had this moment where you were absolutely high because it was just so beautiful. Maybe it felt a little like falling in love. It's a kind of emotion. And if we don't get carried away, it's great. I mean, it brings us great energy. And I remember the first time I showed up at that Buddhist temple in Ann Arbor, it was in 1992. And as I've often said, it felt like arriving at home. I felt like I had arrived for the first time at my true home. And I had faith. It instilled a lot of faith in me. I thought, I can trust these people not to lead me astray. I had what I observed about the people. I knew a little bit about the tradition. I knew that it went back 2,500 years. I knew that this particular temple had been around a long time. There were a number of them. It wasn't a fly-by-night operation. I thought it was pretty good. And there was some skepticism built in. My teacher, one of her first talks that I saw was basically about how you should not trust teachers. And I thought, that's pretty good. I think I'm in the right place. And after the talk, she asked for questions and somebody threw a cushion at her. And I thought, that was pretty good. That's pretty good. So, yeah. There's something very, very powerful going on here, and we can see that, and we can be willing to go further with that. And the emotion and the energy that comes with that is okay. You know, we can't neglect our human side. Number 3, going back the other way, I constantly move from sort of boldness to caution here. Kind of do that in my life. Number 3, we do exercise some caution lest this emotional high turn into some kind of a blind faith. You know, we hold a little bit back, as I said. We're skeptical about institutions. If we find out we've stopped questioning things, we're in trouble. Even when working very closely with a teacher, we might hold a little bit back. We never give ourselves away. And then number 4, so I've talked extensively about being cautious, using the scientific method, being rational, not needing to believe in magic. And many people, you know, take that approach to Buddhist practice, and I totally respect that. I'm glad that there are many different approaches. At MZMC, we try to, you know, we have kind of our traditional approaches with a lot of chanting and ceremony and stuff, and then we have a kind of a contemporary approach that we do. We kind of alternate these things so that people can kind of gravitate toward what works for them. And I think that's great. But I think if we took the rational part so far that we couldn't be open to the unknown and the mystery and the magical, I think that would be tragic, because we simply don't know. We simply can't know. The fact that we can't prove something scientifically doesn't mean that it could not exist or it does not exist. So, but I don't think there's a contradiction here in what I'm saying. You can be cautious about being very quick to believe, but you can also be very open about what it is that you may believe. And about an example, about 7 years ago, Norman Fisher was here to do a guest talk at MZMC, and my wife, Kathy, was talking to him at a reception, and she, being an ex-Catholic, was kind of taking a hard line with him against faith, and she reported to me that what he said, so this is a paraphrase, this is secondhand, he talked about how sad it would be to require proof of everything, how you could miss so much in that way. And as I get older, as I do this practice longer and longer, I think I have come more to appreciate the mysterious, the magical, the unknown, the emotional elements of Buddhism, the devotional elements of Buddhism. I keep a very open mind about those things. because I believe that practicing Buddhism, practicing Zen, is a matter of the heart. And for me, that moment of deepest connection with thusness or non-thusness, or whatever we call it, that deepest connection that takes us out of ourselves, it's not a matter of intellect. It's a matter of letting go of the intellect. And there is, I think, a kind of magic there, because we can't explain it. I say magic because we cannot explain it rationally. We need to be open to very different ways of looking at things that may happen to us that we can't really even express or understand. We need to be very, very open. And I love a kind of a devotional practice I have for a long time. Something that's been really great this past 2 years, basically, MZMC has developed a relationship with TCBA, which is the Twin Cities Buddhist Association. And that's a Jodo Shinshu group up here in the cities. And it had its origin, it's almost all Japanese Americans in that group. That group's even older than MZMC. During World War II, there was a training program at Fort Snelling for Japanese American soldiers who came out of the internment camps within the US, joined the Army, and served as interpreters in the South Pacific, et cetera. So it's kind of a Japanese language school. And after the war, a number of those folks stayed, and they established their community, and it's still going strong. About 65 years later. And we co-sponsored an event with them. We had Duncan Williams here, who wrote a book about the internment camps during World War II. We've had joint services with them. We have another one coming up, I think, in a few weeks. And this is a Shin Buddhist group, Pure Land Buddhists. They do a great deal of chanting, very little meditation. It's very kind of devotional. And I think some folks react a little bit to the religiosity of it. It seems like inconsistent with Zen. But I welcome it in so much. I note that Katagiri originally, when he lived in Japan, wanted to become a Shin Buddhist priest, but he didn't have a teacher available to him. And that's how he ended up in Zen. And I have a great deal of respect for Shin Buddhism. I just love the devotion, because this is a matter of the heart, And Mahayana Buddhism stresses the bodhisattva ideal, which is certainly a matter of the heart. And if I can show my love and my openness and my receptivity through doing full prostrations or chanting the names of the Buddha, I find that deeply moving. And it's not for everyone, and it doesn't need to be, but for me, it means a lot. Last summer, fall, in September, Ben and I led the annual MZMC retreat down there at Hokyoji, and we talked about the Heart Sutra, which has been talked about a million times, but we kind of focused on the more magical, more mysterious elements of it. Gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhi, swaha, sort of the magical incantations and where that takes it and takes us. And that really, taking that approach really brought the Heart Sutra once again alive for me. It's an important element of the Heart Sutra. So I find myself opening very much to a variety of practices. So to review, 4 principles. Number 1, follow something like the scientific method. Number 2, embrace the power and the emotion that comes with faith. Number 3, be cautious about accepting things based on faith alone. And number 4, don't be so cautious that you can't open to the unknown. So I go back again to Norman's words, paraphrased. It would be a shame to require proof of everything that we could accept. I think heart, emotion, comfort, these are things that are not outside of the Zen experience. I think we certainly have enough safeguards and enough skepticism to allow us to open to things in that way. So I think we can all have a little faith in the magic, a lot of hope, and that can help us on our. So that's what I have to say. Thanks for listening, and I think we can have some discussion now. That I could just open this up, and I would love to hear from you all. So I will just, I suppose, anyone is welcome to just unmute yourselves and jump in. Susan, hi.
Hi there. Thanks for your talk, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to share that my husband, Carl, has often said to me that you believe in everything. He said, you believe in everything. And I said, no, I don't believe in everything, but I just don't rule out anything. So I just keep an open mind. And I appreciate that you brought that up, that not to be so rational that with our practice that we leave out the possibilities of the unknown and the surprising. And, that's what's really wonderful about life. And in Zen, we really appreciate that, the freshness of each moment and trying to be alive to that. So I appreciate your bringing that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Hi, Ted. Can you hear me? No? Oh.
I can. Meredith?
I see it going. Hi. Yeah. Hi, Ted.
Hi.
Thanks for your TED Talk.
Sure.
I really appreciated this talk, and coincidentally, Kosen and I just had a long conversation about this very topic last night. And I'm a trained scientist type of person, and I tend to be rational. But as I've gotten older, even like I really liked your example about, in a way, like we have faith in the fact that E equals MC squared. I don't really know that, and I mean, like the idea that we think that somehow everything can be proven out. I mean, we're actually having faith in the scientific method, which is interesting. And I'm a little bit rambling here, but I think back to human evolution and our existence, and that way of thinking is very new. And to have that kind of approach, like everything should be kind of proven somehow, shuts out, I think, so much. So I really appreciate this talk, and it's kind of fun. And I'm also curious to know about some of the more mystical aspects in Zen. I don't know a lot about that, but I'm curious because I've picked up on things here and there from different talks about those types of experiences. So anyway, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Meredith.
Or Carl, we both raised their hands.
All right, my name is Roger. Thank you very much, Ted, for this talk. It's very much close to my heart because I'm confused about many things that you've spoken of, not you specifically, but those topics you've spoken about. And one of them is that as I kind of gathered in the beginning of what you had said, there is a better way that the Buddha somehow understood, as the right view, isn't that an attachment to something better than what there is now? And by attaching to the idea that there must be something better, doesn't that kind of increase suffering? That's the first thing about this. And then I have another question after that too.
That's a very good question. I think, this has to do with, I could say there's kind of a dual nature of existence, but I'd rather say there are two perspectives that we can bring to things. We can bring the perspective of seeing interconnections between all things, interconnections also being emptiness, as we talk about it in Soto Zen, in which things like individual goals are not helpful. But we can also look at things from the perspective of form, of individuals existing. Yes, we're all interconnected. From one perspective, my individuality is really an illusion. I'm not a separate person. And still functioning here in the world, we do function as individuals. And as such, we have practice. It makes sense for us to have goals in practice. It makes sense for us to commit to things, commit to a certain course of training, or just commit to a certain teacher or something like that. So having these goals, thinking there could be a better way to live, is a helpful thing. But we need to understand at the same time that there's a sense in which that is empty as well. Both things are true, and it's not really a rational way to explain how they're both true at the same time. But we can be aware of both of those things at once. And our knowledge of how everything is interconnected, I think, kind of helps us to know we need to be cautious with these goals. If we approach Zen as like a self-improvement program, we're going to get into trouble, because we're going to be looking toward a goal. And when you look toward a goal, you can't just sort of let go and let things be, let things come to you, let them be what they are. So is that helpful at all?
Very much. Yeah, and I've been stuck on this for quite a while, only because I think of my shallow understanding of many of these basic ideas. You had said that the Buddha said that faith must be supported by reasons, and when and then at the end you talk more about being cautious about reasons, because you might miss the magical, mystical aspect of this. And to me, that's confusing. And I think that some of it has to do with the fact that I'm an American. I'm a post-World War II American, and I've been drilled into the idea that there is a reason for everything. And once you find it, you'll solve all these problems. One of the things I'm attracted to Zen about is the last part of what you talked about, which is remaining open to the possibilities. But again, it doesn't mean I'm not confused by some of the language that said we have to have reasons for things, and that we have to be careful of blind faith, because an American hates blind faith. Mm-hmm. We challenge that every day among ourselves. Somebody believes in something and we say, oh, you're wrong. That's just blind faith. There are so many reasons why this is not true, et cetera. So that's the only reason and this is a deep kind of confusion, because of the idea that it's possible for me, because I'm a human being, to construct all kinds of reasons for why things should be better. And yet I resist that because I try to remain open to many things and unattached as much as I can to the aspects of things that I might expect. And that's why I'm a little confused.
Right, right. Yeah, and that confusion, I mean, may have something to do with a little bit of lack of skill on my part in presenting this. I'm kind of saying two things at once here. I'm saying we need to be very cautious. We can't have blind faith. Our faith must be supported by reasons. And then I'm saying, well, but we can't do that so much that we can't sort of, take a leap of faith. And I guess what we need to find here is the middle way, being appropriately cautious while still being appropriately adventurous. And I suppose for each of us, the question is, where is that balance? And it's going to be different from different people. But I think, kind of being aware of those two poles and knowing we need to navigate it, that's something that could keep each of us pretty busy just paying attention to that. So thanks. That's a great comment. I'd love to hear from some other folks if we have a bit more time here. Tim, hi.
Hi. So I had an experience early in my Zen practice where this type of faith that you're talking about, to some degree anyway, kept me from quitting. So I just wanted to share that story. The very first book I read on Zen was Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, the book with the little stories. And then sometime after that, I read two other books. One was called Zen Environments by a woman named Marion Mountain. It's kind of her story about getting into Zen practice and being at Tassajara for a while. And then also Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Those were my first three books that I read. And I did some morning Zazen sittings, listened to some teachers talk. I was at a full day Zen seminar in the Chicago area. And 2 to 3 years had passed, and I was, very interested in Zen practice, did Zazen sometimes. And one of the things that really impressed me about the teaching was that you weren't supposed to believe anything without investigating it. That you could not believe in something in Zen teaching, and it was okay because it wasn't like you had to believe, you were supposed to investigate and verify it for yourself. So here I am, 2 or 3 years into being interested in Zen, reading Zen, going to these things. And my next book, and I can't remember the title, I kind of remember a little bit about it, but I came upon, believe it or not, the Four Noble Truths for the first time. All this time, never come across the Four Noble Truths, or if it had, it was in such maybe the things were talked about in some sort of, parenthetically, whatever. But here they were lined out, and the first one, life is suffering. I thought, what the hell? That's pretty negative. And I said, well, wait a moment. Okay, it probably means, there's a lot of suffering in the world. And then 2 sentences later, no, the nature of human existence is suffering itself. And my thought, bull. I thought, this is, but what was the foundation for me was, my first thought was, well, you're going to have to prove that one to me. And there was really no inkling that I had to believe this in order to continue my practice. And when looking at, faith, as you're talking about, there was all this good experience with Zazen, good talks, Zen talks that I thought were just wonderful. And I thought, well, this is just one, and the thing is, noble truths. These are the first teachings of the Buddha, and they're called noble. And it's like, normally, that would be a thing that would make a person say, I quit. I can't go with anything that says this. But I was just like, well, you're just going to have to prove that to me. And I just continued on my practice. And of course, over time, I discovered that word suffering has much different meanings than what I took at the time. And maybe even the author of this book even explained them then. And I just wasn't getting it. It doesn't make any difference. But I never really considered quitting. even though I had this, very negative reaction, somehow that got missed in all my first stuff. But anyways, I would call that, that I continued out of faith, from my experiences. But anyways, that's the story I wanted to share.
Thank you, Tim. That was great. Now, I don't know if we have more time. Do we need some time for announcements here? How are we doing? Dokai, I can't hear you, although you don't appear to be on mute either.
Dokai, is it possible that you've muted yourself on the computer with the mute button like on your keyboard?
Oh, keyboard.
There we go. I hear you now.
Oh. Whoops, now you're muted on Zoom.
How about now?
Great.
Okay, freeze, don't move. Okay, well, I remember reading in Cuddy's book, Returning to Silence, that he says right faith in Buddhism is having faith when your mind says, I don't have any faith. So, it's kind of simple. Anyone who just sits to session longer than like a day or two, we sit there and we don't always feel like we want to continue. But something keeps us going along. So anyway, I've always remembered that clause or that phrase, right? Faith in Buddhism is when your mind tells you you don't have any faith. And I'll just say, since E equals MC squared came up a couple times here, I don't know if any of you have ever really seriously tried to work that out, but it is a strange formula. I mean, the energy of something equals its mass times the square of the speed of light. Now, why? Who can figure that out? Anyway, if you think about it, it's a really, really hard thing. At least for me, I can't grasp it. Anyway, I'm done. Let's see. Let's check our time. Maybe we should. I'm afraid to touch anything here. We're down to 5 minutes. We could have one more short question or comment.
Okay. Carl.
There we go. So, speaking about faith, and I'm a pretty pragmatic guy, but I was just reading an article about these astronomers that were mapping the Milky Way, and because they could see the shape of some of the way these star systems were coming into the Milky Way, they could then see the shape of dark matter that holds the whole galaxy together. Nobody knows what dark matter is, but because of the gravitational stuff, they're sure it's there. And what the guy described was, if you had a great big Christmas tree outside and it's at night, but the tree is lit up, you see the shape of the tree, but you don't see the tree. But because the lights are in a certain configuration, then you have there's got to be a tree in there. The most likely explanation is there's actually a tree there that the lights are hung on. And that's what they talk about with the Milky Way and dark matter. And I'm thinking that faith might be something like dark matter, that we see points of light throughout our life and our experiences, and the study of the Dharma and the practice. And it kind of illuminates the shape of something that we're not sure of what it is. But there is something behind all these little points of light, our experiences and our intuitions and our thoughts and conclusions and something like that. So I don't know. It's just a funny way of looking at things. But yeah, faith is. And, you know, Jan gave a talk last week on the Faith in Mind poem. So it's there. Anyway, I appreciate your talk, Ted. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you also, Ted, and probably we do need to wind up here.